Apparently, like 50 years ago, young lads used to want to dress like their dads. Apparently, that's a thing. I was told by someone who was in their 70s, so probably going back when he was a young lad. He said the thing to do was to dress up in like nice trousers, nice shoes, and like a little interior vest with like the jacket. You know, you see the old pictures, you see that actually like young lads are dressed like fancy, like their dads, because they wanted to be like, they wanted to like, I don't know, like dress older. And apparently now dads want to dress like their sons. Like the dads are kind of like dressing down more. You know, they'd be wearing like the tracksuit or the sneakers. I mean, I've seen like 40, 50-year-old dads like trying to look cool or dress like cool. And it's awkward sometimes, and it's kind of weird because a lot of times they're trying to be like, I don't know, they're trying to be like, I don't know, younger or dress younger. It's a problem because it's a sign also of kind of like a crass. Do you guys know that? Is that a big word as well? No, crass. Crass is kind of like, it's just like an embarrassing. It's to the point of embarrassment, like the immaturity. It's like an immaturity that is almost even reflecting on the outside. I know a priest who was having a lot of success in a high school in Texas, and they said to him, they're like, "Oh man, you're great. You're relating to the young people. This is amazing. You're bringing young people into the church." He's like, "I'm not relating to the young people." He's like, "That's actually a problem when the church tries to like relate with young people. Like, we're gonna be cool, like, or we're gonna try to like be like them so that they can kind of be like us." He's like, "I don't relate to the young people." He's like, "I relate young people to Christ." He's like, "Get out of here with this like relating to young people. Like, we're gonna start dressing like the young people, or like speaking like the young people, so that the young people are like, oh, that's cool. Like the church is cool because they're like me." Like, that's not what it's about. Like, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Actually, I remember I was in a meeting in Spain. Like, by the way, like when priests start going to meetings, they say it's a sign of their lukewarmness because they have nothing to do. So they're just going to meetings to try to think about what can we do. So I had to go to these meetings because I was at a parish, and it was like the young person's council, like where we were talking about like how to get young people. And I just remember like the biggest waste of time. It was a Friday night once a month, and we'd all be up there, and they'd all be talking about like ideas of like, oh yeah, like the young people, like how do we get to the young people? And the whole time I'm just thinking like, man, these guys just, anyways. One of the things they did was there was a World Youth Day in, I think this was the year World Youth Day was in Panama. And Panama was booked out. You couldn't get in Panama. You couldn't get a place. So like people were gonna be staying in Chile, and they were gonna be like commuting. So they're like, what we'll do is we'll do a tour of the beaches in Chile with the lads, and we'll interpret like creation and like the beaches, under the inspiration of Laudato Si, which is like a document the church came out with on like how we're supposed to take care of creation. And the whole time I'm just thinking like, you're gonna bring like a busload of lads, like Europeans, to a beach in Chile and like interpret creation to like, I'm like, well, thanks be to God. One of the guys said, he's like, "Can you imagine?" Because there's like the bishops were gonna be going as well. Like, can you imagine the bishops like in his tog like on the beach, like, and then like the lads there like with the bishop in his swimming togs, and then like like the Chilena girls there. I was just like, listen, they're gonna be interpreting the bodies of like these South American girls. Like, I did say that. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't want to like burst your bubble, but like that's what's gonna happen. The boys gonna be there like, man, yeah, creation's great. So it's like, this is like this whole idea is, I mean, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and I think like it's like we're supposed to it's we weren't supposed to say the word retarded growing up. Like my dad hated that. You couldn't say the word retarded because my dad took care of like disabled people. We're supposed to say disabled. So you get in trouble for saying retarded. But the word he would say is like, you're supposed to say like developmentally disabled. Like the person's developmentally disabled. Because retarded kind of sounds. Because we used to call each other retarded. Myself and my brothers. Or retard. You say you retard. Like, but you couldn't say retard or retarded. And so it's always like that. A word always was like strong for me because I was like, all right, it's like one forbidden word. Developmentally disabled means that like, I think developmentally there's a disability there, so you can have like a 40-year-old person who doesn't know how to speak or eat or like behave. I remember this one guy my dad took care of, like he would start, like when he would get really nervous, he would just start punching himself in the face, like in public, like full like swinging, like punching himself. So they had to put him, part of the thing was they'd put him in a sheet, like they'd wrap a sheet around him. And people would be like, oh, man, like you're wrapping him in a sheet. That seems like it's like some kind of abuse. But like, yeah, it's better than the abuse he's given to himself. You know, it's like slugging himself in the face. So like they'd wrap him in a sheet. It's like you have disabilities, like you're developmentally disabled. You're 40 years old and you're supposed to know how to eat. You're supposed to know how to like speak. It's normal because you've developed that. But I see a lot in young lads and not so young lads. They're developmentally disabled. You'd say like spiritually retarded. Like spiritually speaking, you know, maybe 18, 16, but they're really like a 2-year-old. Like so a toddler spiritually. Like when it comes to like spiritual, like your prayer life or your notion of God is that of a toddler. Like it doesn't get past, okay, maybe saying a couple Hail Marys, or when there's an exam coming up, I throw up a prayer, or like when someone's really suffering and sick, someone close to you, you like start praying, but your spiritual life and your prayer life doesn't get beyond that. That's as far as it goes. So if we were able to like see people spiritually, like everybody be walking around like pretty bad. You'd be like your man hitting himself in the face. Like that's what we would look like spiritually. Even though on the outside you're okay. And it's a big problem. It's a huge problem. And the cure for that is not to be like, you know, we'll sit down and have a meeting like, okay, so we need to maybe get the lads like, well, maybe we should change the music around in the church and make it cool, like cool music. That was another thing that came up in one of these meetings. Jay, you guys heard the song Despacito? Yeah, it's like it's Spanish, but like everybody knows that song, Despacito. So like they put that song on, like the bishops' conference, like that was the theme song for World Youth Day in Panama. I was like, oh man, like Despacito, like these are like 60, 70-year-old men like thinking these ideas, you know, because that's cool. Like that's the youth love that song, right? I'm like, do you know what that song's about? They anyway, so. Like the problem there is that like they're trying to relate with the young people or like try to bring it down to their level. So it's like cool. That's the most ridiculous. It's the most unattractive thing as well. Like what am I? I'm not gonna come into the faith because it's like more worldly or it's kind of more like the things that I like the music or like the way I'm coming into the church because there's something there that the world's not giving me or that I'm getting fed up with. It's just like that's right there where we're supposed to be going. And you look at lads like St. Damien of Molokai. This guy was, first of all, he's a normal lad. Damien, he played hockey. He was like, he actually got like going into seminary. They had problems because he had a really strong temper, and he punched a lad in seminary. Maybe the lad needed to be punched actually because according to him, he was a bit like, I can't say it, he was a bit feminine, and he knocked him out. And hopefully, yeah, maybe because like those lads actually shouldn't become priests. Like sometimes, like if they're too, maybe they're too drawn towards like the same sex. You know what I'm trying to say. So he was actually a normal lad. He did have a temper problem that they had to, he had it his whole life actually. When he was in Molokai in Hawaii, he also punched a couple of lepers. Which sounds messed up. Like, why you punching a leper? He's already like, but no, like these guys, they were actually causing problems. Damien couldn't do his mission. They were trying to like get him off the island because Damien was cleaning things up, and he actually there was a couple moments where he punched a lad in the face with a leper, like the leper leader, and because he needed to establish the church. But this guy, like Damien, if you look at a picture of him, like you look at a picture of him at the end of his life, he's all like swollen up and he's got like. Have you seen pictures of him, Damien of Molokai? He ended up getting leprosy because he went to this island, a leper colony, as a priest, and he wanted to, because no one would go there, and he wanted to like save their souls, like even though these people were like in their like the worst. He ended up getting leprosy, and his face is all like massive and like disfigured, and his hands as well. And some of the stuff that he wrote down was just like, he's like, I'm all in. I'm doing this because I fell in love with Christ and I want to bring Christ to these people. Like that kind of stuff kind of makes you think like, well, what's going on here? For like a normal guy to go into it to that extent, he must have found something, or he must have had an experience of someone that's starting to make me wonder. You see, like, that's where we're supposed to be going with this. We're supposed to be looking at these adults, these spiritual adults who made it to like spiritual adulthood, because they've had an encounter that's so strong with Christ, and that's what drags people up. That's what drags them up. We read a pretty cheesy phrase the other day. Well, Brother Pablo was saying it was cheesy. I actually thought it was really cool, but then he started like dissing it, and I was like, wait, maybe it's not that good. He said it was one of those like hallmark, like typical phrases that someone puts on Instagram. It was like it was in Spanish, but it said something like the words convince. Ejemplos. Is like palabras arrastran, ejemplos. Yeah, so it was like words convince, actions or examples, like push, and lives sweep up. It's a really bad translation. It does sound pretty bad translating like that. But the idea is like, okay, words can be convincing. People can get pretty much convinced. Actions, when you see somebody do something, that's also kind of like pushes you, and it kind of, gets you into it. But like when it's a life, so that means it's like actions that are backing up the words consistently, like a whole life that's lived. It's just, he's like, that's extremely convincing to the fact that it just like, it drags you into it. You see, that's what a saint is. A saint is someone who's like convincing, because authentically speaking, their words and their actions are the same thing. There's nothing being masked. And that's what we need, lads. Like, that's what we really need. And it's all happening when you have, for yourself, when you come to the conclusion that you've grown up into faith, or you've heard it, and you could even have quirky parents that are into it, which is an absolute turnoff as far as faith goes, because you're like, man, I don't even want to see my parents getting into it, because then they're going to get excited, and then I'm going to be like them, and then we're like, it's like that's all normal in the sense that can happen, especially if you've grown up in it. But like if it's come to you, like, it's something that you're kind of getting on your own, and you're having a one-on-one where it's like yours, that's when things start changing, and you start growing, and you start doing a bit of exercise. You start learning how to walk. You're not like a toddler. You start learning how to eat, how to speak, spiritually speaking. And that's maturity, and that's coming into a proper spiritual life, and we need that, because I hate to say it, but there's a lot of spiritually, developmentally disabled people. And something has to change. Something has to happen. So we're going to ask that grace now in this Mass for a real spiritual life, so that we're not walking around like spiritual babies, but we're learning the language of the Spirit, so that the Holy Spirit can come into us, and we can become spiritual adults and please God one day, saints. Amen.